when were they released?
They started to be released in 2020.
Right, so they were released under Trump.
Correct.
So Trump negotiated an agreement that releases all of these Taliban prisoners
Correct.
into society. From what you're telling me, Trump negotiates an agreement that brings down the troops to a slow bleed to very dangerous levels for the rest of the American troops. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's right.
Okay, so those are the facts of what was happening during Trump. It was not stable, is what you've now described.
Donald Trump's agreement agreed to the closure of bases, the reduction of troops and contractors, the release of Taliban prisoners, gave no accommodation whatsoever or requirement for human rights or the protection of women and girls, and completely excluded the Afghan government from those negotiations.
And does this resolution make reference to any of Trump's excellent negotiating skills in terms of, that sounds like a pretty lousy negotiating deal for America?
It simply references the agreement, but it talks about none of the components we just talked about.
So, and are there any other elements that you want to correct with regards to the exchange that has taken place?
Yeah, one other thing, one of your colleagues mentioned something about $7 billion of weapons and equipment that were left behind. That number actually is the entirety of U.S. military weapons and equipment given to the Afghan National Security and Defense Forces over the entire 20 years of the war, right? Much of it destroyed in combat, much of it beyond its useful life, much of it left unserviceable after contractors and servicing and maintenance were not provided for. That is the entirety. So to take that number and to say that what was left in the hands of the Taliban is just completely misleading.
So the statement about the $7 billion, that was given to the Afghanis, so it was no longer our equipment? Is that what I'm
That's right. In fact, General Milley and General Miller testified very clearly during the transcribed interviews that the United States military took all of its equipment with them.
Is there anything else that you want to correct in the record?
Well, there's more than I think we have time for this evening, but certainly that's a good start.
There's no clock in the Rules Committee.
You're sure? This is it. This is the last Democrat that gets to ask questions.
You know, this notion that the withdrawal, by the way, a lot of the challenges of the withdrawal, many of them, occurred because President Ghani fled the country. After President Ghani fled the country, which nobody anticipated, by the way, nobody thought that was going to happen. And I've spent much of my adult life either serving in Afghanistan, focused on Afghanistan issues. Nobody saw that coming. And then that led to the precipitous collapse of the Afghan military and the police forces, which then led to a very challenging withdrawal environment in that month. But there's no evidence that shows that the situation on the ground and the challenges at the airport in August of 2021 were avoidable. And that or let me be clear, that the attack on Abbey Gate and the death of those 13 members was avoidable. In fact, the Department of Defense's own investigation showed very clearly that there was never a positive ID of the bomber, and nobody knew who that person was. And the majority's assertion that reliance on the Taliban to run checkpoints is somehow related to that ignores the reality that the Taliban and the ISIS are actually sworn mortal enemies and continue to try to kill each other to this day. And in fact, the reliance on Taliban checkpoints made our troops safer, because instead of having to guard the outer perimeter and maintain those checkpoints, we were able to be in an inner perimeter. So these are many, many things that are false or misleading in this resolution, and I would urge my colleagues to not support it.
So